Good morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Mesa City Council study session for the morning of August 22nd. Believe it or not, all of our council is present because we have with us via Zoom Councilmember Spilsbury, Vice Mayor Heredia, and Councilmember Freeman. I see Ms. Spilsbury on camera. Mr. Freeman, are you there?
Thank you, Mayor. I am.
Thank you. And Mr. Heredia?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you very much. First item on our agenda for this meeting is to review our agenda for our Monday, August 26th regular council meeting. So, council, please refer to that document. Mr. Brady informed me earlier that agenda item 3D is being removed from that agenda. Is that right, Mr. Brady?
Yes, the applicant has withdrawn their application.
All right, thank you. Council, I know we just had literally a formal council meeting on Monday of this week, but is there anything in this coming Monday's agenda that you would like any additional information on? Mr. Summers.
Just a quick discussion on 4J, so that's the emergency purchase and dollar limit increase. Chris, Mr. Brady, what's going on with this particular item? What had to be purchased? So it says water resource. Is it mostly vehicles and issues with that?
So there was an outstanding, not an invoice. What, Scott? We went out and established an estimate for purchasing vehicles, the smaller trucks. Take it from there.
So, good morning, Mayor, Council. There's some vehicles that Energy Resources went out and got a contract with Hertz to rent vehicles because we're waiting on some vehicles to arrive. And then we had added employees, but we didn't have the vehicles for the employees in order to be able to go out into the field, and so we were renting vehicles. Then at that point, other departments had tagged on to that contract. Correct. And I think at this point, I'll turn it maybe over to Ed, because then it goes beyond Energy Resources.
So the contract was established with a dollar limit, and with the combined use, we went over the dollar threshold that was established for the contract. For commodities, materials, it's very easy to put an order in the system in a forward motion that commits, encumbers that anticipated expense. For services, you often don't know exactly what that dollar amount is, so it's difficult to put that in a forward motion. Usually it's done in arrears. But in this case, that caught up to us as this group of departments, and we exceeded the threshold. So this week, we have refreshed the department directors on an existing report that we have out there that will help them see the dollar amounts that are remaining on contracts as they're decremented down. It also will show them when the dollar amount remaining and the time remaining are not in sync. So hopefully that triggers some review and action at that time. And we're also looking at a change in process that would put those unfinalized cost type items in the system so that reporting can be done on those as well. That's a little difficult in our financial system, but we're coming up with a process that would help us with that as well. So big picture, we do a lot of contracts. We've been in Advantage for 12 years. This doesn't come up very often, but in this case it did, and it was not a good number that came out of it, and we apologize.
Okay, no, I don't have an issue with the spending because we need the equipment. What this triggered is a concern for vehicle maintenance. Because
this has to do with just waiting for vehicles, just the back order.
So it's a supply chain issue with acquisition, and we're just not able to, and that's kind of
just
outside
waiting
the
for those
control of the
vehicles to
city.
show up.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't clear on what that was because I've seen two dump trucks particularly catch fire. One was a spectacular news story. I've never seen
Those
a
are
ladder.
garbage trucks, yeah.
Garbage truck, right. I've never seen a ladder put up on a garbage truck, but it was effective. And then personally, I was passing one on the freeway and I just saw our white with a blue stripe and that's all that was left. So I was a little concerned that this might be related to putting off costs for maintenance of vehicles. 'Cause
No.
we lost two.
We do have an item that's coming up on the next agenda, and it directly relates to the supply chain length of time to get materials, but also to the difficulties in hiring qualified mechanics, and we're relying on outside contractors to supplement
So we can
our
have that
services.
discussion again about
So we
that
will
issue.
have an item on the next agenda that relates directly to that.
All right, perfect, yeah.
You know, we do have, we're trying to mitigate it.
So essentially what happened is the demand for this contract was much greater than we anticipated, and it got oversubscribed. So now we have to come back and increase the dollar limit on the contract so that we can actually pay the invoices. So the check was, you can't pay, they couldn't pay because we ran out of the limit on the
Yeah.
original contract, so we're just trying to lift that limit up so they can process those payments now.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't an us issue, it's
We're just
more of
waiting
a,
for
it's
vehicles.
the supply chain issue that everybody's still facing. All right, thank you.
And it's going to continue through 2027. I mean, that supply issue, we anticipate that heightened increased limit. I
Yeah,
guess, for
probably.
another
So
20
that's what
years.
I'm hearing. I mean, you'll see items on our agenda of purchasing, and I can't remember what it was, and it's 3 years before we'll actually get the equipment. We're getting authorization now, but it'll be 3 years before the equipment shows up. So we have still that kind of lead time on some of that larger equipment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, other questions regarding Monday's agenda?
I had a couple questions.
Yes.
On 4B, the helicopter maintenance, parts, repair, and overhaul, I just wondered if MD Helicopters does not service their own, they don't,
You just push it across the runway.
yeah.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
I was just curious about these are MD helicopters. Do they not service their own helicopters?
Not the engines, not the drivetrain.
Okay.
It's better suited to the person that manufactures it, which is Rolls-Royce, and they have certain service centers, and that's what we've used traditionally. And this company is who we've used for the past 2 councils, and they're local. Not Mesa, but they're Chandler, so we got it pretty close. So-
Okay. Great, thank you. That was it. And then I also have a question on 4H. So sort of like the vehicles, we have a significant increase for the last 4 to 5 months for the medical supplies. Just wondering kind of what's happening there. It was unanticipated, unexpected.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, members of the council. They're still in the process working on the next RFP. They just needed to extend the contract. They've been working on the supplies. They have to go through every medical supply that we carry in our pharmaceuticals to find a vendor that can do all of them. It was very time intensive, and so that's why they asked us to extend the contract so they can get all the information in for the RFP process.
So you're getting ready to do a new RFP?
That's correct.
Until we just ran out of time, so we
Yeah.
have to continue to, we have to extend
Extend it
the
based on- 'cause
current
they've been-
one until the new one can go out.
Correct.
Okay, and it looks like an increase.
And there'll be-
in
yeah,
that
this-
last little more than a quarter, so maybe
Yes.
there was some
Wait.
unexpected.
Well,
Just
it's just, what's unexpected is the time
Yes,
for the
'cause it started-
contract.
Okay.
Not the supplies. The original contract was expected to go for a certain period of time. We've not been able to get the RFP out in time to have a new contract for the next period of time for supplies. This is just taking the current contract and saying, hey, we need a little more, we have to increase the limit for time to give us, to get the new RFP out on the street.
Okay, okay. So what, do you know, when was it supposed to end, just by?
When was the original time? I don't know, Mayor, do you know
I
when
think
the
it was, I want to say December or January, but they just need more time because there's so many supplies that they're looking at that they want to make sure the vendors can cover all of them.
So it says the initial contract was for 3 years.
Yes. Oh, the time of the contract?
So that must have just expired, will expire here pretty soon because we're extending it through January 31st.
Yes.
Okay, so it looked like an increase as well in dollar limits.
It's just
You're saying
increasing the,
because of the
it's not
extension
like,
of time, there's more going on.
I think Mary is treating more people,
Okay,
but not
yeah.
that dramatically.
Okay.
It's just
That's-
extending
that was
the
my question.
contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Folks online, any questions regarding Monday's meeting?
I'm good.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith, it looks like there's several items off the consent agenda on Monday, but they all seem kind of clumped into two different developments, right? And so we're going to do two, even though there are multiple zoning cases, we're going to do two public hearings?
Correct.
Okay.
And then you could vote on we'll probably sort of have two little mini consent agendas,
All of 8 and all of 9?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll do all of 8 together and then do
Yeah.
all of 9.
Okay, that makes sense. Great. All right, council, any other questions regarding Monday? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Item 2A is a presentation and update on Mesa's balanced housing plan.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. We are here to present the final presentation on the balanced housing plan. As you are aware, we have been collecting data, working with various stakeholders for the past almost 2 years now. So we're here this morning with me is Jeff Robbins, who was a project manager for the project. We have Michelle Abenezi from Housing and Community Development, and we also do have our consultant from ZPF, Susie Becker, online to help with this presentation. So with that, I'll go ahead with the presentation. And the question that we often get asked is why a balanced housing plan, or what is the goal of having a balanced housing plan? The couple of goals for having a balanced housing plan is to help inform the city when it comes to housing needs and supply. As you know, so many times when we are reviewing either a general plan amendment, rezoning cases, or any special use permit that comes to you about housing, the question that often gets asked is, do we need this? Are we in shortage of housing, or are we over supplying housing in the city of Mesa? This balanced housing plan gives us a fair assessment of our housing needs based on projected population, and then also our historical average of housing production and supply in the city of Mesa. And it helps us to have strategies of how we can address any housing needs based on the assessment. And it also helps basically foster the public-private partnership. And as you know, it's also an required element in the general housing, in the general plan that is going to be put before the voters in November. We use several approaches in making the plan. One major process was the public participation process. So during the general plan data collection stakeholder input, we also included a balanced housing plan, and majority of the conversations that actually transpired during the general plan making process was housing needs and how we can continue to help foster or facilitate the environment to have adequate housing for our projected population growth. We also did access and use several data sources, secondary data sources, and primarily the goal of that was to see who lives in Mesa, what are the incomes, because as we know, housing has a direct correlation with income. How much you make determines how much generally you can afford. So we looked at our housing and income. And as part of that, we also looked at various trades that are in the city, and as we work with economic development, what are the jobs that are going to be coming? Because we also want to make sure that we are providing an environment to obtain housing supply for the jobs that we are looking for in the future in the city. And then based on that, we do have a recommendation or a couple of recommendations that came out of all the approach from the citizen participation, the data that we collected, and various conversations with stakeholders as well. So with the public participation, as you see, it started January 2023, went all the way to March 2024. And we basically had various stakeholders. One of them was the developers advisory group. We also had a focus group with realtors and developers to see what trends they are seeing in Mesa and what are the housing needs that they think that we can help facilitate to really attain those housing, and what are the things that will encourage, others to actually leave and not move out of Mesa. We also had various conversations with various boards. One of the boards that we actually met, or two boards that we met with, one was a housing and community board, and we had decent discussion with them, and some of their recommendations have been incorporated into the plan. They also did help us to look at other information or data as part of the plan making process as well. We also did speak with the Planning and Zoning Board, and I'll give you a little update with a conversation with the Planning and Zoning Board. And then as part of that, the public participation process, we also held various meetings with nonprofit organizations, because there is a section of housing that we believe through our data and our research that the nonprofit groups are better suited to be able to help us provide housing for those groups as well. So as you can see.
Excuse me, Donna, we have a question.
Oh, sorry, before you go on, I just wanted to, so in the Realtors Focus Group, improved perceptions about living in Mesa was part of the discussion. What is that? What is the perception?
The perception so many times that from what they told us was when they have this example, executive or high income earners moving to or looking for a place to live, the question they ask them is, what am I going to do in Mesa besides having a nice house and coming home? They believe that there is a perception that there is not much to do in Mesa compared to the other cities. So what they encourage us is not to look at only the housing itself, but all the other things that do go with when you live in a community, what are the things you can do. We have, and they acknowledge that we have so many amenities in Mesa, we have so many other things, but it's not well publicized to the community that, to the those outside Mesa, that, you can go hiking, you can go do this, there's so many other things you can do. So they want us to really, really focus on that as well, and not just housing itself.
Thank you.
I'll just make a comment on that. That's what I hear in my district all the time. Because there's great housing. The developments out there have been absolutely phenomenal, lived up to expectations. Where's the retail? Where's the entertainment? Where's the hospitality? Where those types of things? And if I'm hiking, biking, going to a theater, I got to get in my car and I got to, it's not just up the road. It's somewhere else, and this is being reflected in that. We're bleeding activities into other communities, and from my district, Queen Creek and Gilbert have more stuff to do, and it's a 20-minute drive. So I'm hearing this loud and clear, and this housing plan has to tie into our economic development as well. So, thank you.
I would just latch on to that. I mean, same with my district, but as we've had this discussion of how much do we control of it, it's not, we've talked about the city does a pretty good job of our placemaking, but people love their homes. They don't love necessarily the commercial spaces, as you said, the retail, the restaurants, that kind of thing. And how do we work with the development community with the restraints that we do have and role that we play as a city?
Well, there's different answers to that, right? Because Councilmember Duff's area is different, and the solutions there are different than mine. Mine are related to developers that have fallen short on that particular part of the vision. So what's the solution to that? But also maximizing the space that's available. We're working, Mary and I are working on a project right now that can integrate both of those things, the housing, affordability, availability, with the retail and the entertainment and all that, all integrated in one in a town center-like environment. And so that's So I think that speaks to what we're talking about here, how we maximize the space that's left before we're built out to create places, not just slap down homes or apartments, but to integrate them into really.
Mixed
Play-
use,
Exactly,
Which is
mixed use, right.
one of your recommendations, yeah.
What you're looking at, the graph you're looking at shows that Mesa is projected to grow significantly in the coming 10 years, which means there will be people moving here, and we need to find opportunities for them to live or have housing supply available to them. So as you can see, historically, we've been growing, and we are projected to continue to grow. What you're looking at, this graph shows the age demographics over the years. So 2010, 2015, 2020, 2030. One significant thing that this graph shows is by 2030, those over 65 are projected to be the highest number of people living in the city. So that ties back to the collaboration and coordination with economic development to really find opportunities to really change this trend, or at least attract those in the middle age and the younger population into the Mesa, which tied to with they live here, what are the things that they're going to be doing as well. So at the end of the day, this is why this is a balanced housing plan. We wanted to approach it from a balanced perspective of economic development, community development, and then development services as well, what we do. So with all this initial data, what is the summary? What do we basically see from this? That to make this plan, we had to utilize multiple data sources and public participation input. We are projected to grow about 20,900 by 2030 and reaching a population of 543,900. And we are also, if we don't change the trend, or at least help to really minimize that, we will be aging at a faster rate than the national average. And then residents over the age of 65 will be the largest population cohort by 2030.
Mayor, Council, so this section talks about income, as Nana mentioned. We studied income as a key factor in the balanced housing plan because it does help us to understand the relative buying power of the residents that exist here today, as well as it talks about the types of housing that may be in demand in the future, and that's something of interest in the balanced housing plan. This particular table that you're looking at shows us the median household income for Mesa compared to some of our surrounding cities. And this is a very high level view, and I also want to point out it's a snapshot. We control our trends, we can influence those. But what we see here is that there's a very wide range of median household incomes across the region. On this particular chart, going up to about 115,000 down to as low as just over 52,000. We're somewhere in the middle. And I think one way to look at this table that's informative is to compare us to the county average. And we're comparable to the county average, but slightly less. And why that matters to the balanced housing plan is it, again, helps us to, at a very high level, say, okay, here's maybe where our center is, and this is, and there's going to be demand at the high end, at the low end, but this is kind of where our center is in terms of purchasing power and home demand. So the next few slides, we're going to be talking a lot about area median income, and you're all very familiar with that, but for those who are watching who aren't, very simply, it's a metric that's used by the federal government to help us to understand income distributions in any particular area. So this helps us to say, okay, in the Phoenix area, what's normal? And what we're seeing is at 100% AMI, so that's 4 lines down. In Mesa, our income range for what's right in the middle is between $67,000 to $84,000 a year for a household. And so 50% of our households are going to be below that, and 50% are going to be above that. What we did for the balanced housing plan is we looked at these AMI definitions, and then we attached those to an income range and said, okay, if you're making 50% AMI, this is this income range. If it's 150, it's this range. And then we took it a step further and said, okay, so how does that help us understand what somebody making money in this range can afford in terms of housing? And so what we then did was we said, okay, now that we understand what this income range can purchase, what does that mean in practical sense when we go out to the market today in Mesa? And so what we did as an exercise was we looked at homes for sale and homes for rent in Mesa. And we went out in May of this year, so not too long ago, and we just got onto Zillow and we said, okay, with this income range and with this AMI, this is an example of what's typically available. And so for 50% AMI, we found that you could buy, pretty much your only option is a manufactured home. And by the way, this does not account for any fees to rent land in a park or any utility fees. This is strictly the structure. And as we start moving up into 80% AMI, that's where townhomes start to appear on the market, usually around 1,000 square feet or less. And as we get down to 150 AMI and then a little bit above 100 AMI, that's where we start to see single family homes begin to become options for purchase. It is interesting that 150% AMI, so that's your average income plus 50%, that's when you start seeing some of those, what we could consider to be starter homes. So 160, 1,600 to 1,700 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath types of units become more available. And then at a high income earner, there's more options there, and this is just an example of one unit that was on the market at that time. So for rental, we did a similar exercise. We looked at different income ranges and then paired those with what was considered to be affordable in terms of rents. And then we did the same thing and we looked at 50% AMI range, and there were no listings on Zillow at this time at that particular range. Now, there's an important caveat here, and that is this is also partly a function of what Zillow is made for. So if I had a house and I had an extra room and I wanted to rent that to somebody, that's not a typical transaction that's going to appear on Zillow. So I want to make clear that there are housing arrangements that are available at this level, but not the type of traditional purchase or rental agreement situation. When we go up to 80% AMI, that's where we start seeing, of course, studios become more of an option. This is a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom that you're seeing, about 600 square feet, so a smaller unit. And then as we get up into the 150 to above 100% AMI, then townhomes start to become available. And I think for us, maybe a surprise is that when we started getting down into single-family detached homes, which is the most prevalent housing type in Mesa, that's where the high income earners are actually finding options. This particular unit you're seeing was renting for $3,800 a month, which that falls within our high income bracket. So some of the takeaways from our income, what we learned is that Mesa's median income is a little bit lower than the counties. It's also slightly lower than the national average. Residents generally have to start making about 80% AMI if they're going to find quality middle housing options, which we consider typically to be your entry-level housing, is that at 80% seems to be where that becomes achievable. Also being able to rent ADUs and that type of product. And then this is very important as we start plugging it in and comparing income data with our other data, that starts to tell the story about our supply and demand needs.
Sorry, Judge, say again, the AMI is, what is the area of the AMI you're using?
So AMI is tied to our, I'm going to use a few acronyms here. It's tied to our Metropolitan Statistical Area, okay, which is a designation created by the federal government. And what that is think of basically Maricopa County, mm-hmm, and then a big swath of northern Pinal County. That's our metropolitan. That's it, right. So okay, it's going to take in every single household in that. It's going to go from a household that makes zero income to the very richest household. And then what it does is it goes right down to the middle, the midpoint, and that gives us our median.
Okay, great, thanks.
And so, Mayor, Council, in terms of housing types, again, what I think is very much known to everyone is the majority of our housing stock is single-family detached homes that constitute about 59%. And then we do have single-family attached, and then duplexes or fourplexes being kind of the next category. And then we do have mobile units or mobile homes also being a certain percentage in the city as well. That's, mobile homes are about 10% in the city. And then the question that typically get asked is, well, how many building permits are being issued a year? If we're talking about housing supply, are we issuing or basically getting permits through? If you look at this, this is the residential building permits that were issued between the 2018 and 2023. As you've seen, we've seen significant number of building permits issued. So on average, we issue about 3,000 building permits per year. As you can see from this chart, it just fluctuated a little bit. But 2021, as you can see, were some of the highest building permits issued for the past 5 years as well. So the graph basically breaks down the single family and multifamily and gives you the line which is the total of single family and multifamily combined. So based on the historical average of building permits issued, we also looked at one major component of the balanced housing plan is to look at our housing needs. And Susie can talk about this, but we did look at the population, the people moving in, the historical needs and all that. And based on that, the projected housing need for single residents is about 1,359, and for multi-residents is about 806. So combining both single family and multi-family, we will need about 2,165 housing units being added to our housing stock every year to be able to keep up with demand over the years.
Nana, could you tie this slide to the last one? So single residence is 1,359, but we're issuing permits to 811. So that would be that we're falling short?
No. So maybe so this slide, permits issued, what you're looking at is the number of building permits that we issued from 2018 to 2023. And then what you're looking at this slide is the average number of building permits that we've issued. So it's the averages of 2018 to 2023, which shows that on average every year we issued about 3,000 total housing units, which is both single family and multifamily. The projected yearly housing need is how much we will need. So overall, we will need about 265 units, and we are issuing 3,000, which exceeds the projected housing needs.
But I think you have to be really careful with that number.
Yeah,
right?
that's why I'm asking.
Because the composition in 2018, you all see it right on that slide, go back to was dramatically different. It's like polar opposites between 2018 and 2023, even though, well, there were more permits in 2018, but even though you could say, well, there are over 3,000 permits, and we're meeting the 3,000 permits, but what the market is offering was practically all single family back in 2018, and today it's rare that there's a new single family home getting permitted. I mean, it's happening, but obviously since 2021, for the last 3 years, it's been majority multifamily. And I would suggest that again, it's going to go to the issue of, to me, this all comes down, the economic development is income, right? It's getting people in Mesa that have the income to both pay for the housing that will bring them into the, that we have the housing that meets that higher income, and that they have the disposable income that create the demand on the amenitized opportunities. But while we're at 3,000, it's not the same kind of 3,000 that it was 5 years ago. It's a very different type of housing options, new housing options that were available in 2018.
What about space too? I mean, we've had some really large Cadence, Eastmark, several others
Master
plan communities, thank you, that have developed out, but we're kind of running out of that space. So how do we meet the need that's projected here, given the land mass that we have left available for this type of development?
Mayor Council, that's really a good question. That's also why we have now the Urban Transformation Group to really help with infill, because some of those areas can be maximized. We can look at our infill on underutilized parcels and find opportunities to really extract and harness the highest and best use of them. So we know we are running out of space, but we need to maximize and start looking at areas that can actually be redeveloped.
Yeah, and other cities have done this too, where once you run out of space, you start building up
Yes.
and getting a different project. The other question, the final question really on this one is, so this is the number of permits issued, how many were executed on? Were they actually built?
So it's difficult. We do get a monthly report from the Builders Association of how many were built, but it's also difficult to really track that. So from our part, we were looking at how many building permits that we issue every year, because some of them obtain the building permit and insist on it for a number of years. So we want to also make sure that, we are taking into account the number of permits that we've issued that can possibly be developed for housing.
Yeah, so your responsibility is to issue the permit, which all the check boxes are
That's
made,
correct.
but then the developer actually has to build a building, and we could issue the permit, and they
That's
just
correct.
don't build what they say they were gonna build.
That's correct.
Or just hold on to it for a long time.
Yeah, and that's
Then do
another.
it in the future.
I don't know what we can do about that, but that's another problem when it comes to this discussion about the lack of affordable housing and availability. We're issuing permits. Is this stuff getting built as planned? Interest rates are killing, yeah. All right, thanks, Don.
I have one other just comment about that is there's a certain assumption that's being made about single family and multi-residence based on purely the cost of things. And I think our housing choices are shifting quite a bit, especially as we become more of an urban environment in many parts of our city, is that now your townhomes, we can't assume they're all 250,000. There's luxury townhomes that are going to be 600,000. So the luxury condo, we don't see condos really on the market for a number of reasons. We won't go there. But there is a shift, and especially with an aging population, is that they could be downsizing, but not necessarily downsizing the cost of their residency. They're just exchanging for an environment that is easier to take care of or lock and leave. So I think there will be a shift with an aging population. And of course, the market is going to build according to, they're smarter about this than we are, and analyzing what needs to be built. But I don't want to get too wrapped up on it has to be single family or it has to be multiple residents. I think the market can kind of choose, because there is a shift in an urban environment and with an aging population as far as what does that cost of the housing represent in the market. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Duff. So what are you looking?
Can you see that I raised my hand? I think no one noticed that I raised my hand. I don't.
Thank you, Julie. Please go ahead.
Sorry to just jump in there. Yeah, sorry. I had to turn my camera off because the connection's bad with my face on there. So I had similar questions and thoughts as Councilmember Summers and Duff, actually. So some of that's been answered, but I struggle constantly with, and I've talked to Manager Brady about this a lot, but when we're making decisions about when to approve housing, right? We just keep hearing housing shortages, so we keep approving all of these things. And a lot of it has been multifamily housing because that's what the market has been dictating. But I guess I'm wondering bigger picture here. Obviously, developers make a lot more money off of multifamily housing. And so is that why they're being built? Or is it the market that's driving it? And like Jen just said, some of these are really, really nice multifamily housing, and that's just what people want. I think there's a part of that conversation that I'm still confused on. And like Councilmember Summers said, we could be issuing this many number of permits, but if we're not building it, I just never feel like I have a really good complete picture of how much we actually need, how much is actually being built, how much we have we have, thousands of units, I think, that are being currently built. And I just am always worried about us saying yes to too many things and then having an overstock, I guess. And then where's all the single families being built? So I don't know. That was too many thoughts all thrown out there at once. But this is all really confusing to me of how we figure this out.
Mayor, Council.
Everyone's like, how do we answer that question? Sorry.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, so having this information itself is a good start. What we are working on as a department with the other departments is whenever moving forward you get a rezoning application for housing, we're going to provide this data and show you the existing housing stock and how many units by approving the project is going to be adding on. There is another factor that comes into this conversation, especially when we're looking at rezoning from commercial to residential. We need to include this discussion to see whether we are in short of housing, and is that the reason why we need to convert commercial zoning into residential to be able to meet the housing needs? Because as much as we want to help housing supply, we also need to maintain a balance of land uses in the city, and so we want to make sure there is a right proportionate of housing, commercial, and all that. So that information is going to be critical when we're making a change from commercial to residential.
That's a good point. And I would say, Mayor and Council, one of the things that I think we can answer the question that we often get criticized by the developers as well as the legislature is we are issuing permits. Yes. We are issuing permits for housing. We are not holding back. We're not it's a remarkable, the consistency. I mean, there obviously 2021 was a, peak year, but otherwise we are issuing permits. They're processing, and if you want to build in Mesa, Arizona, you can get a permit. Now, what's the right mix? What's the right type of housing? And we have to be careful. I mean, Mesa is a big, big place, and it's not, I don't think you can just say with one formula, here's how it works, and one side of the city works and this other side of the city. So you really kind of have to break it down a little bit and find out what's happening inside, within a certain, it's not even council district, right? But we kind of have to define areas of the city and what that influence is. So that's a more difficult question, but the answer of Mesa is open for business. It does issue permits, and if you want to build here, we'll make it work. Now, we need to work on the qualitative side. We need to work on the amenities. But we can get permits are being issued.
And the jobs.
What's that?
And the jobs.
And the jobs.
I know we're going to get to it about the AMI and where the need is, because there's a significant need on the lower end. So I don't even know if it'd be worth it to microanalyze this, even by district of, okay, to take care of the income needs of this district, you would need X amount of units at, I don't know. I guess, never mind. I'm thinking while I'm talking. People can always move according to where the housing needs are, especially with the, lower income. And it makes sense to be nearer to transit and such. Okay, thank you.
Just to kind of tack, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud as well, but this, to me, doesn't reflect what we're about to get into in the needs. The current issuance of permits is not really helping to improve the need that we have identified, which is the very high end and the very low end of cost.
It's fair.
And just to
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, since we've kind of paused, let me share some thoughts as well. So I don't mean to disrail the presentation, but it seems like we're taking a break to get some council feedback. I want to underscore what Mr. Brady said earlier. Mesa is a very large city, and we are a very diverse city when it comes to housing. I'm sure I could take a visitor to different neighborhoods in Mesa, and they would think they're in North Scottsdale, or they would think they were in Gilbert, or they would think that they are in an affordable housing neighborhood in a less affluent community as well. So we've got whatever you're looking for, you can find plenty of it in Mesa. So I think that's a point of pride. I mean, there are some communities that are all one thing or another, and we're not one of those communities. And this next legislative session, we are going to be under, the affordable housing folks are going to come back again with a vengeance, and they're going to want to take away zoning authority and do so many other things, saying we're in a housing crisis, we have to, override, cities are broken and we need to fix them. And so we are going to have to articulate what our plan is, and that, no, we're not, there is a plan, and that's the point of this presentation. So we're going to be challenged on housing availability. I think that's where we say we need 2,000 units a year. We're permitting 3,000 units a year, so the availability is not, if you want to talk about availability, go to the developers and ask them why they're not building all these units that have been entitled. They're going to say because of interest rates, but that's another discussion. And then the next question is, what about, are they affordable? We've got lots of working class folks that need a place to live. What about that? I think, again, the presentation is we are weighted now on multifamily as opposed to single family. So it's more weighted towards affordability than it is affluence. So I think we've got a good story to tell when we're going to be, questioned in this next legislative session. The other question I think we need to concern ourselves with is what's the quality of this housing? Because I know we mentioned that Mesa, I think, has always been perceived as being too weighted or very weighted when it comes to mobile homes. And I have nothing against mobile homes, but mobile home communities are kind of, the sustainability of those communities is kind of baked in at the very beginning. Though these are not permanent structures. They are meant to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we're seeing the end of a lot of those communities in our city. So I think we need to ask ourselves, is 10% too much for a sustainable community? Should we adopt policies that aren't as encouraging for mobile homes, additional mobile home parks, or figuring out how to transition the existing mobile homes into more sustainable neighborhoods? So I hope that's a question that we're wrestling with. And then I would just say at the end, it comes back to the balanced question. What we've learned is Mesa is slightly below average when it comes to affluence and medium and income. And I think we ought to aspire to be right in the middle. I don't want to be Paradise Valley, and I don't want to be a community that's perceived as being, strictly blue collar. In order to have the types of retail amenities that our citizens want, we're going to have to increase, be perceived as a place that has money to spend. So those are some thoughts in terms of, again, this plan. I would say we're all very concerned, and we're all very, we want to be advocates for affordable housing or subsidized housing. All of those things are very, very important, but I think we need to temper that enthusiasm with it can't be too much of any one thing in our community to be balanced.
I think you'll see that on the next slide. And Mayor, you said something that's really important that the staff has brought to me, and we're going to come back to the council sometime in the future about working with some of these mobile home parks to allow them to convert to, what's the right word? Conventional build, stick build foundation. So, because we're finding there is some interest out there, but there's some of our issues of code that kind of make that more difficult. So we are taking that as an idea that to incentivize the idea to convert from a mobile home unit to conventional build. So we're trying to work through to see how we can put things in place to encourage that. Because you're absolutely right, Mayor. There is, from the time a mobile home is put on its pad, there is a period of time that it really is only sustainable for. And we've seen the challenges when some of those parks get well beyond their life and the challenges it brings for redevelopment purposes.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, Mayor, I think Mesa may be fairly well balanced, even though there's some work to be done, but we should also think of this regionally. There are other communities, quite frankly, that have targeted one specific economic demographic and gone in on that, and that's had some consequences for some of the retail, entertainment, and hospitality that we've talked about. We've lost 2 malls out of Mesa over the past, 30 or so years, raised flat. People used to come into Mesa and shop in Mesa, and there were things to do in Mesa, and it all got pulled out to those other communities because their housing plan is very much slanted toward a certain demographic. So being balanced should involve the region as a whole. Other communities need to take care of their workforce housing as well, and not just say, hey, we're gonna have Mesa do it, right? So, just something to consider as the legislature takes up this issue in the next session.
Just to comment on that, I think also we have to look at these, our surrounding communities is the employment base that they have and the income of those jobs versus many of the jobs we've had here in Mesa. And so that is very important as far as when we do our economic development in industrial and manufacturing, whatever that commercial is that we look at the number of jobs and the income of those jobs in order to have more balance that we need to support, to bring.
Balanced employment goes with balanced housing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We can't have a low income and nicer homes. Like, we have to bring up the
No, I
average wage
absolutely
in
agree.
order to support better homes.
But when they have the retail jobs, which don't pay as much, and where those folks live, they're probably not living in those communities, which puts a greater strain on them as well. Drive until you can afford it. You remember that term from a long time ago. So, but you're right. I'm gonna say it, I had a meeting with an entry-level apartment provider about locations in Mesa. And they talked about the region and the need for this in the region. And I said, well, if your demand is driven by these other communities, why aren't you looking to locate closer into those communities? And they said, they won't even talk to us. Told me that's my face. So that's the challenge that we're having too with this regional plan. Very important work, you're doing a great job, but it has to be, somehow we have to have that conversation regionally about, providing this as a whole. Right? Try not to call out names.
Well, we do need to support the lower AMI.
Oh, yeah.
If we don't, our homelessness just increases. So there's a balance there too. And just saying we're not going to have affordable units and just say 50, however many, so sad, 50,000 unit, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that, but back to the mayor's point, or even yours, there's both sides of this, right? There seems to be a negative smile here. We need more low-end units and we need more high-end units. Well, everybody's going after the high-end units. I don't think we should be, Mesa shouldn't just be the only one that addresses the need of workforce housing. We should be definitely working on that, but we can't be the only community, because otherwise getting the economic development we want, it's going to make it even more difficult. All right.
Thank you. Please continue.
Mayor Council, I'll pass this section to Susie, who's our consultant.
Oh, thank you for hanging with us, Susie. I'm good. Susie, you're muted. Do we need to unmute her in our booth or something? I'm sorry, we're still not getting audio from you.
You could hear Julie.
Yes. Susie, I think you might need to unmute on your side.
She just said she did.
Yeah. So how are you at drawing pictures, Susie?
All right. Mayor, I'll go ahead and explain
Okay.
until Suzanne is able to jump on. But basically, what you're looking at, this graph shows the housing need based on income levels that we talked about and then the housing that is available. So basically showing what people are able to afford. So purchasing power based on income and the population categories, and what we have, the housing stock available in Mesa. So if you look, people making 50% or 30% of AMI, there is a gap. So the gap, the green is the shortage. What you're looking at, the blue bar line shows basically the household income range, their purchasing power. And then the red is the housing that is available. So the difference between the blue and the green gives you the green, which is a shortage. So in situations, we do have, on the left side is a shortage. And then on the right side is basically the purchasing power, the units available, and then what is actually remaining that people can afford. So what you're looking at, those making 300,000 or more, the units available, the red bar graph shows the units that we have available in the city. The household range is what people can afford. And it's very important to know that the fact that people can afford doesn't mean they may want to spend that much, because this evaluation or analysis is based on people spending 30% of their income on housing. So people may be able to afford, but they may choose to stay in their homes and spend 10% or 15%. But if we go with the hard number, which is 30% of your income on housing, we do see. And it's also important to know that because of the shortage in the higher income, from our discussion with the stakeholders and even some of the realtors, there is significant, I don't want to say significant, but there is a number of people that move out of Mesa when they get to the ability to be able to afford, and they're looking for something within that price range. They hardly find them in Mesa as well. So they end up moving to the Gilberts, the Chandler, the surrounding cities as well. So this is why it's a balanced housing plan, to be able to really capture and get those people living in our community. In terms of the middle, as you can see, which is the majority of the housing that we have, people making 100% or 130% of AMI, we actually do have significant number of units available. So right now, if you are making within that income range and you want to buy a house within that in Mesa, you can actually find a house in Mesa. And all the majority of the projects that we see are within those, although the number keep increasing because the housing cost is really increasing now. So looking at when we talk to the developers, some of the price ranges that they are quoting for housing is beginning to really put us into the executive category, even for the 2 and 3 bedroom units in some of the communities that are coming up.
So this one is interesting to me because we talk about that missing middle. I'm not exactly sure how you're defining it, but to me, this is not we're not missing middle.
No.
We have an abundance, an oversupply of middle. And you can see a clear line and that's at the 150% when people are leaving. Right? So we don't allow that upward mobility here.
We're not meeting that demand.
No.
Yeah, we're not meeting.
You have to move out.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah. And it has been for a while, I think. Yeah, that's a great point.
Is there anything we can do about it, or is that just totally market-driven?
I think back in the day, that's why we spent so much time and a lot of effort putting together the big master plan communities. It was to continue to that was a conversation we had as we were putting those together, as we needed to capture that group. And yet, even despite those large master plan communities, whether it's East Mark or Cadence, Bella Via, we still, it shows there's a demand for it, because those filled up fast, they built out quickly and they filled up fast. And people, so what I would say is kind of take not on just a little bit in its conclusion, people want to live in Mesa, right? But we've got to provide the right housing for them, because people like entertainment and amenities, but what they really like, that we can beat a lot of communities, even the ones that are all leaving to, is it's a safe place. And we have a really good school system. So those play into it. But Yeah, we're missing that, and that's where you've got to figure out where the land is available and encourage those developers and landowners to look to those opportunities. And I think that we just have to keep having those conversations. But that's a great point. Now, on the bottom end, that's more difficult because those are incomes that are like less than $30,000 or 30, something like that, right? I think below, and that's a tough one. And so that's another, that's kind of where we get the housing, you know, that's where Michelle comes in, and we're trying to figure out ways to provide for those opportunities. But we are losing a lot of people to surrounding communities. If they, you know, when they get to that point where they can afford a nicer home, a bigger home, they're going south of us, and that's where you see, I mean, you can go talk to the generations, and there's a lot of people that used to live in Mesa that now live in those other communities. So.
It would be really interesting to look at it historically also, since we've seen a shift in the cost of housing since 2022. Many people, including me and many people I know, we bought at a lower housing price, significantly lower housing price at a low interest rate. And even though incomes might increase, there is no way you're going to buy into the current market because of interest rates and the cost of housing. You're very content to stay where you are and not hit the ceiling of what you could afford because you don't want to get into that market. So the market dynamics really kind of also control the shifting of markets. And so, I don't know, it's just a comment. I'm not discounting what you have to say. I think it's very valid.
I agree with you too.
We've had some unique market dynamics in the last couple of years that also can affect these analysis. So that's why I was looking at historically. It'd be interesting to see how shifts occur. Thanks.
Well, and then to Scott's point about the region, I just wonder if the 50 and the 30%, we are getting, as the surrounding communities continue to increase their high-end housing, is that squeezing into us and increasing the demand for the lower housing, the more affordable housing? I don't know. I mean, if you look.
You know, so back to the question of what can we as the land planners do to steer this in a direction? I mean, I look at my own family. I've got people at all stages of this. I mean, I'm going to be moving out of my house before too many years, I imagine, and I'm not going to be able to find a family that can afford my house, right? Because houses that were built back when I was building and it's too big, and you know, a young family who should be moving into my house isn't going to be able to afford my house. I've got living with me right now a daughter that's moving from her starter home to her next home, and they found a place in Mesa to do that, but it was very difficult. So, I mean, yeah, that to Mr. Brady's point and to Alicia's point, that's, I think, I don't know how to find more of that. It would be wonderful if we could take the hundreds and hundreds of acres of mobile home communities that need to transition and turn them into that housing stock. But how do we manipulate it to happen?
And I'll give credit to Mr. Freeman. He has areas where he's had development come in and they wanted to do very small lot developments and create more of that, kind of in that middle part of the housing. And he said, no, I think we need to push for more, I think the word we were using, executive housing and larger lots and attract those. So that's one way council can have that kind of an influence also.
Well, if I may, Mayor, it's not just mobile homes, but we got a lot of retail that's ancient and probably unusable at this point in some pretty good locations, some of it even along the light rail line, that would make excellent redevelopment projects. So how do we facilitate taking those old big box shopping centers that are no longer, well past, talk about useful life, well past their useful life, and reinvent that into mixed-use space that then can provide housing and some new refreshed retail and entertainment.
Yeah, and we're having those conversations with large development. I mean, the staff has been working with our property owner at Fiesta, and that's and Councilman Heredia, and those are the models we're looking at, is bringing high-quality, mixed-use development, so it's not just one. In the past, the development patterns where it's all residential or it's just all commercial. Now we're looking at ways to blend those together, so.
And doing that the right way is important, because what's happened if yes is probably a template for Superstition Springs at some point, although I'm hoping that we can reinvent the retail in that area to something, you know, Santan Mall, but with integration of residential uses, something that's really attracts a lot of interest.
I think with, you know, the strip malls and such that are depressed and often very vacant, we have an opportunity somehow to get it into a mixed-use zoning so that we allow it. What happens is it's just like commercial, and whatever commercial or retail that was, it's not working for that environment, that area anymore, but it's stuck in that zoning. So if there's an easier way to transition it so that you can say, well, it might be a little retail and a little housing and some services in there, so it can also flex over time, but within the lot right now, it could be a little bit of everything and be in the environment. And as far as the mobile homes, I think an opportunity might be doing the stock plans. A lot of those units they're the same size lot pretty much. And if we had some ones that we knew that would fit there, that would save a big amount of money and trouble. Designing a small space is very difficult to have someone to do it, and it's expensive per square foot. So if we said, oh, here's 3 different plans that fit on this size of a lot, and there would be pre-approved by the city as far as the design of it, all you have to do is get your approval for making sure it fits on the lot and it's hooking up to services. And it would be an automatic, like it's not such a big, arduous project to do this. And we've been talking about this also for the ADUs to make it easier to transition. Here, this looks great, and I'll just change that facade a little bit. The floor plan's great. Just making it a lot easier to be able to transition, our existing housing or opportunities for infill. Thanks.
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you for the discussion. And I just want to touch base on manufactured homes and our mobile home parks, because as you know, in District 1, there's quite a few of them. And I know in District 2, there's a number of parks as you go further east. But a lot of these parks, I've really worked hard with some of the corporate developers. I'll talk in particular with Center Street McKellips. It was just recently purchased by a investment corporation out of Utah. There's about 460 mobile homes in the area, and they're transitioning every one of their older 1960s and 70s models into a manufactured home. And so they're making the rent. The corporation obviously owns it, but they're going to be able to put in a brand new manufactured home and then be able to lease out that home. So that's moving forward in that area. Another portion like Apache Wells, there's a lot of mobile homes in that area, but they are all privately owned. And so there's a lot of discussion there about mini homes. How do I convert from my mobile home to a mini home or a manufactured home? So I think there's a transition there that will allow workforce housing. And I yesterday just talked to a developer who wants to put multifamily, and I pushed back and I said, it'd be really good to have some patio homes or townhomes on this property to allow affordable, and I use the word attainable today, and I don't know what's attainable because some of my other areas in our property, as you know, in District 1, they're about $700,000 to $800,000 just for a beginning home. But anyway, these smaller infill developments need to be something that we focus on. And I'm interested in Nana's analysis, our housing gap analysis and policy recommendations when we get there. But that's just my comment on the manufactured homes. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've already summarized this slide, so I'm going to move on to the next one.
But before you move on, sorry, Nana, I guess this is where I'm confused, this first bullet point.
Yeah. So we believe, based on the price points that we've seen, the middle housing in terms of the units that are coming is more of your townhomes and your duplexes, because if you look at the price ranges that we showed earlier on,
But no, I think she's looking at the previous slide and saying,
This one?
you're showing, no, the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, are you defining middle housing by square footage? Are you defining it by price?
Type.
Household?
Type, yeah.
Housing
Mayor-
type?
Not AMI.
Correct, right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the type of house. And so the pie chart, Nana, I think it's on slide 16. The pie chart, I think, is what we're talking about with middle. And so we talked about, when we talked to the realtors, was what are people wanting in Mesa that they're not finding? And they said, there's absolutely a market for townhomes, especially for ownership of townhomes. They want that, but when we take them to Mesa, we can't find that product. And so when we talk about middle housing, that's what it is. It's that new starter home. It's a duplex, triplex, townhome type of product that then allows people to build equity and then be able to launch into a higher product.
But according to that chart, we have an abundance of starter home, that price range.
At the price
Yeah,
range,
and
correct.
So you're telling me somebody wants to buy a townhome over a single family that we have available?
Well,
In that price, because if you're talking price, that's in the same price.
Mayor, Council-
And I would agree, I agree, the housing type, we don't have enough for sale townhomes, fourplexes, things like that. But the equivalent, you can get a I mean, the reason you get that a lot is because it's a little bit cheaper, but you can own it. But what we have already is a single family that you can own.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, it's also important to look at our income, because some of the middle that we're talking about now that we have in abundance, right now as of today, the income doesn't match up with the value of those homes. So you're looking at the 2-3 bedrooms now selling for $450,000, $500,000. If you look at the middle housing for income in Mesa, those are actually for those in the 100-120% AMI. So you have to consider the income as well to determine what your missing middle is as well.
Okay, so you're saying a newer middle housing type is going to be less than that?
It needs to be considered as well, because right now, if you look at something that 10 years ago was middle housing in Mesa, right now, looking at the value of those homes and our income, it's actually not a middle Mason housing right now. Those are higher income housing. So I can show you example, the table that we're talking about. So if you look at this table, somebody making 100% AMI in Mesa, which is about 67 to 84,000, this is the housing price range that they can afford. The type of housing that we're talking about in the middle on the graph are ranging between at least higher end of 150 AMI, which is about 450 upwards. So if you look at this income range, what is the missing middle in Mesa? The missing middle, let's say people making 80% of AMI, 226,000. There is nothing that, based on our research that we found, that the closest that can be within that range, about 300,000. Those are your townhomes, not your luxury townhomes, but your, average moderate townhomes.
So now, I guess I'm maybe not reading these right, because if you go back to the chart, the 100% AMI, it shows that we have a surplus. We're not missing any.
Yeah, we have in terms of supply, what is right now available, but we are not using the value per se of those homes now, because for the past 3-4 years, the value of those that are available has actually shot up as well.
Okay, so your numbers are old.
Someone coming into the market today, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful not to take this chart, which is kind of like where people are living today and what's available. I think we're talking about someone coming into the market at those AMIs. They're just not these same options for them to move into.
Yeah.
Although it's confusing, Nana, because this suggests there's surplus But even, I think the surplus is actually pushing the values up, so it pushes them outside of what they can afford, is what I think we're saying.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're right, if you look at those other charts,
No.
it shows that, someone who's making whatever, the 110% of AMI can afford a house that's 226,000 or whatever. Well, there aren't any homes
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
that are, even these wouldn't, you couldn't afford those, because they're gonna be over $350,000.
Susie, I hear you are back online to be able to add to the conversation.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Right.
It's a different bill.
Great.
Can you add to this, the gap analysis, if you have anything else to add?
Well, I'm sorry I missed a bit of that discussion, having to leave and try to enter and fix the microphones, and thank you to your tech crew who helped work through it. Yeah, it's just, I think you've talked through it. It's a simple demand and supply analysis here. We have moving market conditions, as you were just discussing. People entering the market, what is available to actually for sale is different than what's based on the assessor's tax rolls. This chart is based on what is currently on the assessor's tax rolls and what are the current incomes that we are showing. This chart is not showing who's looking for what in the market, but we tried to address that through a lot of interviews with developers, realtors, brokers, those active in the housing market.
It's almost like if you had. Are those the assessor prices?
Susan,
Yes.
Okay. So it's almost like you could have bought a home 10 years ago that you could afford. But today, the value of that home has increased so much that if you had to try to buy it again today with that same income, you couldn't afford it. I think that's what's happened in this marketplace, is that, people are in homes that are much higher value than they probably could purchase again based on the income they had. I think that's what's happening. I mean, my house is significantly increased in value. I don't know if I would have looked at that same house back when I purchased it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think we're trying to take all this information and just present it in different ways, but.
How much of that is attributable to the cyclical interest rate thing? I mean, when rates come back down, are the right people going to be able to afford the right houses again?
Yeah.
Or has there been a shift that has
Right.
all of a sudden priced people out of where they ought to be living?
Yeah.
What's the answer, Susie?
Yes, we have a chart, and it makes a huge difference what the interest rate is. Any of you who've worked with interest rates know that even a small change in interest rates makes a huge difference in what you pay and then what's affordable. And we have shown affordability at different interest rates in some of the analysis we've done. And that's a great question, and you're right on.
Okay, so that we're going to cycle back to a time when families can reset their housing before rates climb back up again.
I don't know.
And the assessed value is capped 5% annually. So the assessed value does not reflect the true value. It's certainly less than sales
Right,
price, we know
right,
that.
yep.
But when it's capped at 5% a year and not following the market, it skews.
Well, remember the 5% just cap at what you can tax at. That doesn't stop the value.
the value.
The value can continue up, but the chart will show is like, but we can't, for secondary property taxes, we can't increase
I see.
our tax amount by more than 5% a year. But people's houses can go up 10, 15%.
Got it.
so Mayor, Council, in terms of the recommendation, I know some of you have already been discussing part of the recommendations. Talking with the development community, one thing that we always hear from them is if we streamline our development review processes, they will be able to basically provide housing at decent prices. And so we hear them, we try to continue to find opportunity to streamline our processes because they always tell us, even yesterday, that 1 week in delay add a huge cost of interest that they have to pay. So we're looking at other ways to streamline our development review processes, although I would say we do compare with other cities and we are doing really, really well in terms of our processes. One thing that they discussed with us is parking standards, and I know this is really, like Mr. Brady was saying, we have to look at the whole city. Parking becomes an easy discussion, but when you look at various cities and how parking affects various cities, it's very important to take that into consideration. So It's something that is part of the action plan for the balanced housing that we'll be looking at housing in various locations. And they also recommended we utilize the form-based code in various areas of the city. Right now, we've used it in the downtown area, and we can explore and use it in various areas because those are straightforward if you can, and it helps minimizes the lengthy processes that you have to go through as well. And again, encourage mixed-use development because where you have people living in places where they can access all the amenities in those areas, it does help reduce the cost of transportation and other things as well. So those are the things that they are encouraging us as we look into rezoning, we look into those areas that are prime for redevelopment as well. And then another critical part of the recommendation is for us to look at infill, making infill more accessible and more practical in the city. So we are working, I know the planning team is working with solid waste transportation on possibility of bringing an infill ordinance, and then with the urban transformation group as well. And then finding opportunities to look into allowing more diverse housing types in our zoning district. And then promoting ADUs, which I know Mayor is working on a schedule to come before City Council before end of the year to find opportunities to incorporate ADUs into our development. Sure.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our existing programs and also what the Balanced Housing Plan has identified, which really confirms and validates the programs that we are administering today. However, with that, we also have to be very flexible because when the market conditions change, as we've talked about here, the programs and services and the needs in the community change. So when we're talking about expanding programs and continuing to fund the programs we have our annual funding process, which we will continue, and those priorities of the programs and services that we fund will change depending on what those needs are in the community. We are just about to embark on our 5-year consolidated plan, and I'm sure that's going to show some very different priorities than what the last plan did. For instance, expanding our down payment assistance programs. We'd love to provide down payment assistance, but it doesn't work today in the market conditions. So when the market conditions change, that is something we'd like to explore again so that we can have those different opportunities and housing options for the different range in income. Right now, we're seeing most of the folks that are at the lower end of the income can only afford rental. They really can't afford to purchase. Additionally, supporting vouchers from HUD. So as you've heard Mary and Rosario speak, we have a certain number of housing vouchers that are allocated to us on an annual basis. It's not like we can ask HUD for more. That's not how that program works. However, when they come out with new housing vouchers or additional ones, or even vouchers that other entities can't utilize, we will absolutely take those in because we always have the need to provide that subsidized housing. For supporting programs to rehabilitate older neighborhood, we have talked about infill, and that's something that I foresee coming down the future with some of our assistance programs. But for now, we have really expanded our emergency repair program, as we've talked about over the last year. The need for immediate assistance with air conditioning, roofing, and other types of repairs that folks can't afford, that's what our demand is right now. And it's really preserving the existing affordable housing stock because folks can't afford to move. So even though they have an older home, they need to be able to provide those repairs. I just wanted to give you an example. We've gone from approximately $800,000 to $1 million a year in that program and assisting 40 to 50 households. This was our record year at $3.9 million, and we assisted over 140 households. So you will see in the upcoming funding process, we will be continuing to ask for more money for those programs. And then providing supportive programs for aging and elderly. We do that now through our partnerships in funding different Meals on Wheels programs, cognitive learning behaviors, different programs and services for the elderly. However, as Nana has mentioned, the community is continuing to get older. So we're going to have to look at housing options, supportive services, those types of activities that tie in with housing. Go to the next one. Okay, care for the homeless. The Office of Homeless Solutions is rapidly growing, and it seems they're taking on new activities, new initiatives on a daily basis. But with the Housing and Community Development Division and the Office of Homeless Solutions, we are really working closely to make sure that we are supporting Mesa's housing path, that we have availability along that entire path of different types of housing. But it's not only housing, it's supportive services, it's resources, it's really getting folks ready to go to that next step. And as the office continues to grow, the new programs come out of that as well. Coordination and planning is really important right now to address homelessness, and that is something that the Office of Homeless Solutions and our division are working on with nonprofits, different nonprofits that maybe we've never heard of before, or they have a very unique way of delivering services and programs that we haven't seen in the past. Workforce development programs. Continue to collaborate with the Mesa Workforce Center, as well as partnering with the Mesa School District, with EVIT, with different types of trade schools, because I see this in my family with my kids, that the traditional maybe college route isn't the right path for everybody. So we have to have other opportunities that set them up to be successful in their careers so that they can obtain housing down the road. And finally, facilitating co-location of essential services. This is really ensuring that if we have housing, that we have support services, whether it's on site or whether we have an area that there are multiple types of services that somebody can go to, whether it's childcare, because childcare is a huge barrier to workforce and to affordable housing. So if we can talk through working with some of our partners to do more of a facilitation of those services, I think that that's really going to set folks up for the future. Any questions? I'd be happy to entertain.
Thanks, Michelle. Mayor, Council, another significant part of the recommendation of things that we're working on with economic development is to basically find opportunities to attract higher paid jobs. As we said earlier, you can see there is a direct correlation between how much you make and how much you can afford. And so finding opportunities to grow our employment base is really critical of looking at ways to address our housing needs, and also continuing to support our current workforce and encouraging those workforce development programs and assisting and expanding if possible. And then as we are able to do that, we can continue to work with the development community to provide high price homes to really meet those gaps and the missing middle that we're talking about, because we believe that there is opportunity to really attract those as well. So again, it's has to be a collaborative effort between economic development, planning, development services, teams, and then community development as well, to be able to really address this balanced housing need. And what you're looking at, we went to Planning and Zoning Board to have this discussion, and some of the things that the board advised or recommended us to look at is to find opportunities to encourage home ownership. And we hear this a lot when we go to the community. And so one of the things that we are doing as part of my department is whenever there is a project coming in, the planning team really work with the development community to find ways that in the future, when those maybe multifamily small lots, when they become ripe for single ownership, it can easily be platted to be owned by individuals. So we encourage, and we do ask those questions whenever we are reviewing projects, that do you foresee this happening in the future, where there could be the possibility of people owning their own lot. And if they say yes, we give them certain things to consider so it doesn't become a hindrance in the future as well. And Councilmember Duff, I know you talk about the pre-approved plans. One of the things that the planning team helped with this part of the recommendation to really research and see what the other jurisdictions are doing. And we know Maricopa City, Havasupai City also, and a couple of cities, Mary can speak to this, are looking into exploring opportunities to have pre-approved single family. This is not ADUs, but pre-approved single family plans that basically we've done a building review, we've done everything, so you have your lot, you can just come and utilize that without bearing the cost of hiring an architect or any other professionals to really. So our goal is true that it may minimize the cost of construction and it may encourage, and what I heard from the council, we will look into that as we look at the mobile homes. That may be something that I can explore with the planning and building division team to see if there is opportunity for that as well. So those are the recommendations. We do have an action plan that we are working on, assigning those responsibilities to each department or divisions to continue to really chip away some of the things that we can do. And with that, our goal is to bring the final balanced housing plan, which we gave to the council a couple of months ago, for your adoption in September. And with that, we will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Maybe too much to say. Going back to slide number, was it 26? To attract, higher end housing and I know retail is that we look at our urban villages, creating those places that we can have in close to housing that creates that sense of place where there's entertainment and services and stuff, I thought, and accentuating that, have a sense of place in order to attract, why do I want to live here, and attract the retail that we want. I think we get too complacent with the gas stations and drive-thrus, and in places around homes, we need to have the urban villages to serve those surrounding neighborhoods, so they have the retail and entertainment and things they need within a very short distance from their home. They're not needing, if they have it in their backyard, maybe they won't be going to Gilbert, maybe they won't be going to Scottsdale. And how can we put emphasis in our economic development to identify where those opportunities are to have an urban village? Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I read the entire balanced housing plan. Excellent job. Thank you, and I appreciate Michelle's department as well, that we're looking at it comprehensively and not just as a housing stock, but we're making it more human in all levels of income and how we can become a city for all. So thank you.
I guess this is more of just a comment and admission of a bit of frustration with the sort of, I guess, the aspirations or the goal of the city and the practicalities of it. So yes, let's encourage, let's try to attract those high-wage jobs and encourage development to build more of that missing middle, more of that high-end. But practically speaking, and you all know that when a developer comes in and says, here's the plan to build 800 units of what we already have, and we suggest, why don't you think about this? I mean, we've all had these discussions. Where do we go from there, right? I mean.
Data supports the past and not
right.
the future, what people want.
And it's a little frustrating. I guess we have to say it. I guess we do have to say, this is the goal for the city. But I wish there were some more concrete tools to use when the rubber hits the road and when the zoning case comes up. you know, that we as a council and management have some ways to really work with steering developers into building what this city actually needs and what will take us in a sustainable way forward. There's a disconnect so far from what I've seen in the last year and a half, when it really comes down to those hard conversations.
Mayor, Council, and Councilmember Gofor, yeah, the one thing, we facilitate development, and this is where sometimes it becomes very challenging because you cannot tell a developer to go build into a certain price range. One of our primary functions is to ensure that there is quality development and there's quality environment. And we believe that when that happens, it will help basically create some of the price point that we're looking at. And also, we have to look at it from legislative perspective and what is allowed administrative responsibility. So when we have a development allowed by right, we're looking at the quality. We cannot force the price point as well. So the goal of this, actually, we also get asked so many times when the development community or somebody is coming, there are a few times where we get the opportunity because they ask us, what do you want? That doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So when they ask us, what do you want? We tell them, well, this is our balanced housing plan. This is where we have the gap. We will support this. We will encourage you to go this route. And this also become a tool that our economic development team can actually use as they talk to developers and all that.
Yeah.
Great. Any other comments? Something Councilmember Goforth said a moment ago, I wish we had concrete plans. I mean, this is a balanced housing plan. I'd love it if it was a balanced housing action plan, much like our general plan where we say, here's the list of the bullet points that, you know, here's how we're going to, the path that we're going to have to achieve these goals. So, you know, a middle housing action plan as opposed to just saying, I mean, I saw our plan is to quote unquote explore opportunities to ... And it would be great if it was, here are the opportunities, you know, to make it progress on these points. So, yeah, and I know September's right around the corner, but if the plan were less aspirational and more of a roadmap to arrive at where we want to be, I think that would be more helpful.
Mayor, Council, we do have, we've broken down much more into the specific and which division is doing what as an action plan. So we do have that as an action item, and we can review that, and if that needed to be added onto the final plan, we will.
Great. Love it. Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to having this come back in September. Mr. Brady, I think some of us have to be somewhere at 9:30, so I'm wondering, we're anxious to talk about the art mural contract, but I wonder, would that fit on our Monday agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. That's what we're going to suggest.
Great, okay, perfect. All right, moving on to 2C is to take action on appointments to various boards and committees. There's a motion to that effect. Thank you, Mr. Summers. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Duff. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. How do our folks online vote?
Aye.
Okay. Aye. I heard Julie and
Aye.
Mark. Frankie, are you and I?
Aye.
Okay, there we go. So that passes unanimously. Next is current events and conferences attended. I'm sorry I missed this on Monday. I assume Julie spoke for about an hour on this on Monday.
She was actually quite brief.
Was she?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
I'm defending you, Julie.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed that. I said that with a lot of sincerity in my voice, Julie. You can't tell from where you're at, but I promise you, if you're in the room.
I know.
Okay.
You were very, very sad to miss it. I'm assuming you'll watch it later.
Absolutely. Who would like to share on this item? All right. Well, there are a few things that my staff wrote, because I wasn't here on Monday, but over the break I did attend a climate symposium at the U.S. Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. that I was happy to represent Mesa at. We've had some big events, Mesa Public Schools Business Roundtable, East Valley Safety Fair, Last week, I was on a panel for a national organization, Zeta, that was visiting here in the Valley, talking about EV supply chain. And I don't know if, have we talked about our College Promise celebration? Was that discussed?
Frankie, someone did, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. I'm glad that we talked about that. It's fun to see the College Promise cohorts continue to grow, and that was a large and very successful event. Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future meetings look like?
So Mayor, we'll see you on Monday. I think we'll keep the same start time at 5:45 since there wasn't a lot of discussion on the agenda, and we'll use that time for the presentation from our Mesa Arts folks.
Sounds good.
Thank
That concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Summers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.